Our research group says more than 7 out of 10 men who are attending churches are struggling with sexual purity.
Yeah.
And so something's off. If we're not talking about it, where can we talk about it? Well, the Crucible Project is a place where we can, where we can be real and we can talk about it, and not just talk about it, do something about it.
That's right. Walk differently.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hey, so glad to have you today. It's Roy Wooten with Byron Myers again, the Real Christian Manhood channel here on the Crucible Project Podcast. You're in for a wild ride today. We're tackling a topic that might be sensitive for some people. So if you're riding in the car with your family or mixed company, or you just don't want to talk about a sensitive issue for men, go to the next podcast, because today we're going to talk about sexual purity. Well, here we go. Hey, welcome, Byron.
Hey, glad to be here again. Always a joy.
Sexual purity, what a topic. I mean, is it even talked much about these days?
Man, maybe with a finger wagging at church, but other than that, I don't know how much it's actually talked about.
Around church, I see more and more what would be considered mega churches, evangelical churches that are huge. 15, 20, 30,000 members. They just don't talk about sexual purity anymore.
Yeah.
And the message is we just don't want to talk about that or think about that or whatever.
Or we don't want to upset anybody around it.
Yeah. And as it relates to Crucible, we really teach 4 big things, courage, purpose, passion, and integrity. And integrity seems to be the closest to this to me.
Yeah, I agree. If we profess to be one way, but we're acting another, we are out of integrity. Yep.
Really, around integrity, it's like, what commitments have I made in my life? What agreements do I have? Some are commitments that I just make between me and God, and some are between me and other people. Like, I'm a married man, and I have a commitment to my wife, and we are in it for the long haul. Right? So how does my sexual purity look in my marriage? And how does sexual purity look in the agreements that I have with myself around anything sexual as it relates to my commitments to God and my marriage?
Exactly. And I think that's become kind of loose these days, and probably started somewhat in the 50s and 60s. And we're feeling the fallout of that from so many years ago.
But does sexual purity even matter anymore? Is sexual purity something that we should be paying attention to as it relates to our own souls?
It's interesting. I wonder what made that become loose. I don't know that Scripture changed. I don't know that interpretation around sexual purity changed. Not in terms of what you're talking about, integrity of, I'm committed, and this is a purity that I'm going to keep within that commitment.
Yeah, and I don't think it has. I think socially we've moved. I'm reminded of some of the research that says every time I make an agreement or a commitment to myself that I don't keep, it makes the next time that decision gets in front of me even harder to keep. In other words, there's this like trailing water running down the mountain that at some point becomes unstoppable. And we feel like that if we don't keep the commitment this time, well, I'll do better next time. But the research shows otherwise. Whether we're talking about eating donuts and we're on a diet, we made agreements to work out and we don't keep our agreement with ourselves, those commitments, little by little, tear down our desire to, or our ability to really keep our agreements. And therefore we start spiraling out of integrity.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember an analogy I heard long ago and I've used a lot. It's like a square peg in the square hole, but if you turn it enough, you round the edges, and then it never fits again. Never fits again, right? And As we slowly deteriorate around our agreements, we could get to a place around our conscience, corners of our conscience, and be in danger of going down a path that's very, very hard to come back from.
And so I do think sexual purity as it relates to my own soul matters. As I keep my commitments to myself and to God, and if there's another person in our life, to the other person, my soul is in better shape, is healthier. And as I don't, we become less healthy.
You know, I wonder if sometimes when pushing past our agreement around sexual purity, if we don't see God as punitive, somebody just says, don't. And instead of recognizing part of the reason why he said don't, it's very much like you and I telling our kids, don't stick that paperclip in the light socket. It's going to hurt, right? It can be dangerous. God already knows that it's going to damage our soul if we let it go too far. Right. It's really hard.
He's the creator. I believe he created me and this body and knows how it works. And he created our mind and how it works, and our heart and how we feel. So the Bible is a type of owner's manual. If I pay attention to it and do the things it says to do and not do the things it says to not do, I'm in a little bit better shape than if I don't. I also know that there's this big movement within the world that from a non-Christian perspective and a non-religious perspective, there's more and more attention being paid to living in sexual purity with yourself and taking long hiatuses from masturbation or sexual connection with others in any form for the purpose of things not going out of control.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a friend, he's a loosely associated friend, who decided that him and his wife were in sexual integrity with each other because they had decided to be something called polyamorous. And so they were in integrity with themselves because they were polyamorous. You know, it did not end well. The whole thing blew up eventually. I don't even think it was a year long. I also have friends who have gone through a divorce, and somehow what the Bible said about sexual purity did not apply to them until they found the next person that they were committed to. And then all of a sudden, now it makes sense that I ought to do it that way. So it's very confusing. You know, I believe the Bible's very clear. For me, it says that I'm not to have sex anywhere but in my marriage and with no other person and no animals. You know, there's some rules like that. And that person, my wife, it's her and I for life. I mean, that's the way I read it. And I know that I have sins that I work through and challenges in my life, but just because someone sins differently than me doesn't mean that mine's any less or more than theirs, you know. So I think God is a God of grace and around this. I think he challenges us. He challenges me to live in sexual purity for my own sake, for myself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a sin is a sin is a sin. But as we've lived, and you and I both have been in several different ministries in our life, we've heard this in the youth ministry world. We've heard this in other arenas. Sin is sin is sin, but they all have different consequences. God's consequence is always, you ask forgiveness, you're going to receive your grace, you're there. But there are human consequences. And like you said earlier, God knows us, he knows our bodies. And when we get that chemical dopamine ride started in the sexuality area, I mean, Song of Solomon was just clear. Don't arouse love too early, my love. You know, telling us ahead of time, hey, this is going to be really, really difficult if you go down this path. And so it's really, really hard. And then the hormonal and the chemical changes can affect the thought. Oh, well, kind of an oh, well. And man, it's hard. It's just difficult.
Yeah, and I think about the old saying, if you get close to fire, you're going to get burned. This idea that I can set up my life so that whatever the temptation is that I'm struggling with, I'm not getting close to. Like I am doing my best to avoid. I'm doing my best to not put myself in places that, or in ways that would get me close to the thing that's calling me, the sin that's after me. at the moment. And as it relates to sexual purity, I think it's so important for us to set up our lives so that we have every chance to not get in a situation where we're tempted, where we're getting close to the fire.
Yep. And that's difficult. My own story, I was not raised in a way that sexual purity was championed. And my father was not that way. I had some family members the same way. I was introduced to porn at 8 years old through magazines. It's difficult to overcome. And as I've worked hard to try to keep integrity around sexual purity, I don't have the exact passage, but one phrase from a passage around Joseph's life when he was being tempted and pursued by Potiphar's wife, he said, "How could I do such a thing against the Lord?" Right? He wasn't even thinking about his own body or his future wife. He's just thinking about how could I? That how could I has landed and stays with me. Sometimes it's a guilt thing because I haven't done well. I've lusted or I've fantasized or whatever it might be, but it is also a pretty good fence to put up. How could I?
One of the beautiful things and gifts that Crucible has been to me has been to be with other men where I can talk about my stuff and they can talk about their stuff and receive grace, but them champion with me. You said you didn't have any champions early on. Champion with me my own desires around whatever it is, sexual purity and other things. It's so different than whenever I was 20, maybe 24, young father. My wife and I have been married 4 years. We had fun as a young married couple without kids. And then along came my son, which was just a beautiful blessing in my life. But all of her attention and every cell in her body became about him for, I don't know, 18 months. It was just like, hey, I'm still here kind of thing, babe. And I found myself in a very lustful place. Back then we'd get like catalogs in the mail and they would just show up in the house. We didn't have Amazon, that you scrolled through. It was just in the house. And so I noticed the models that were in the catalog. I noticed some of the women who were at work and what they would wear or how they would move. And it was really bothering me. I went and talked to my pastor and he said, well, you're going to have to talk to the elders. They were the deacon board, elder board, whatever. And so I sat with two older guys I had a lot of respect for. I was teaching in the adult discipleship model and very active at church. And I said, man, I'm really struggling. My wife and I don't get together very often anymore. I notice my eyes wandering. I notice all of these things. I said, how did you get through this whenever your wife, whenever y'all had a baby? And they both looked at me and said that they never struggled with it in any way. And I think they just lied to me. Like in the moment, I thought, wow, something's really broken about me. Yeah. Therefore, I better never tell anyone else about this. And so I stuffed it pretty low. But in Crucible, I found it doesn't matter what I bring. It doesn't matter what I want, what I'm challenged with. I can sit with other men and be real and honest, and they don't reject me and judge me. They care for me. They give me grace. And then they challenge me.
Yes. Yeah, a community of grace is what we create, but it also is a community of challenge because we don't just let you sit in it either. Don't let me sit in it. And what are you going to do now? And what commitment? And now there's accountability with the commitment that we've made. And somebody's there, not trying to gotcha, but more of you're going to hold yourself accountable because you made an agreement. Are you keeping your agreement? That's really basically it. Right. And yeah, just beautiful circles that we have. I felt the same. People I really respected seem to not have this problem. Right. So I'm broken. I must have to figure it out on my own. And,
well, the Barna Research Group says more than 7 out of 10 men who are attending churches are struggling with sexual purity.
Yeah.
And so something's off. If we're not talking about it, where can we talk about it? Well, the Crucible Project is a place where we can, where we can be real and we can talk about it and not just talk about it, do something about it.
That's right. Walk differently. walk differently. It is a commitment. It's huge. I think many a man has even sat in a circle somewhere at a church circle, giving away just enough for somebody to feel sorry for them that they've had some sexual thoughts or some lust, right? And they get a little bit of relief. I did a little bit of confession, but that was it. They got the relief. Okay, I'll feel better now. I can go tackle it without a commitment. And anybody there to go, hey, I'm here championing your commitment. The accountability is nothing but championing your commitment. That's the circles I want to sit in.
First week I was back from my initial weekend back in January 2009, I had a coaching call with our founder, Greg Houston. He had been on the weekend with me, and we kind of checked in, how you doing, and what's going on in your heart, something that we teach, a check-in. And then he asked me, and how's your sexual purity? I mean, he just flat out asked me the first time I met with him. It seemed like every month or so when I had my coaching call, that was one of the questions he would ask me.
Yeah.
And I think of him asking me that as a very loving thing for him to do.
Yeah.
Because no one else in all my Christian world ever asked me that.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful.
So one of the questions I'll leave as we're wrapping up this short podcast, how is your sexual purity?
Yeah.
How are you doing in your commitment to yourself and to God? If there's someone else in your life, to them, where are there opportunities for you to have a conversation with someone about it? And if you don't have anyone in your life, we have some help for you. We've got coaches who'd be glad to have those conversations with you. Or if you come through one of our weekends right now, we have about 35, 40 more this year, right? Scheduled. Yeah. They're easy to find at thecrucibleproject.org. And you will have an opportunity to talk then and also to be a part of a brotherhood on the other side of that retreat. So, Byron, do you have a challenge for men around their sexual purity?
Yeah, find that circle. We'd love to be that circle, but find that circle that will challenge you, will hold you, champion your purity, champion your commitment, and will hold you in grace if you don't make it. Because we all fail. We're all failing forward, hopefully. That is super, super important. I don't know how I would have made it through the last 15 years without it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Byron, for having this discussion about this hard topic. I know that we'll have some more in the future, so be watching for the Real Christian Manhood Series on the Crucible Project Podcast. And if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and we'll make sure that you get notified in whatever way that you listen to podcasts every time we drop one every Monday. All right, well, God bless y'all, and looking forward to our next conversation, Byron.
Take care.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you're listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.